The Apache Geronimo said, "War is a solemn religious matter." Larry Decker, who works from a Sufi perspective in the VA in Santa Barbara, has written a wonderful book called The Alchemy of Combat, which draws from Jung's alchemical work, as well as the Sufi tradition, has written some wonderful work on this in this area. I liked these lines. He says, "Combat is such a mix of horror and bravery that it can be called mysterious. Such an experience can not only horrify and repel, but also attract and sanctify. Coming face to face with Ares is a numinous experience with all the terror and awe that such a confrontation with the gods of war implies. The initiate will never be the same again. His life's or her life's journey is now set on a different path." The first thing we need to do when working with combat veterans and they say they've changed is to honor that mark of change. It can never be undone, and we shouldn't try to undo it without insulting that veteran's heart. And it's very reassuring then to that veteran and the family when they know that there is something else that can be done rather than trying to undo that change. A second theme in the war zone is that one's omnipotent and idealized fantasies that belong to adolescence shatter. One becomes consciously mortal overnight. A third is the experience of dissociation that is described very well by a psychologist at West Point who was a colonel in the Ranger battalions. That's David Grossman, who wrote a wonderful book called On Combat, and another one on killing. And he describes the splintering and discontinuity in experience, so that what you have is like a series of shards or a whole collage of images without a clear sequence or narrative or emotional coherence. This is one of the most extraordinary combat photographs that I've ever seen. That young man is a South African paratrooper, Mike McWilliams, parachuting under fire into Angola. You can see the smoke from the bombing run just a couple of minutes earlier. But they were parachuting into a camp armed with bunkers and trenches. They said that we could hear the rounds passing through our canopies. In fact, I was back in training just about a year after this, and I was the only fellow in my section who hadn't parachuted into that attack in Kasinga. I'd been in America at the time. He had put a camera on the parachute, on the reserve parachute of the person behind him in the plane, which had an auto rewind, so it took a photograph every 3 seconds. And this photograph just happened to capture him about 150 feet from the ground. He's pulling hard left. He's trying not to land in a river. 4, the rupture of the world. What we call a world is held together in language and time. Combat shatters this communal order of human relations, social expectations, and institutions. What combat veterans have is a knowledge that the fabric of this aesthetic and moral order is thinner than those at home ever imagine. The 5th theme is that we are witnessed, the combat veteran is a witness to evil. And Colonel Kurtz is the horror. To encounter radical evil, says Jonathan Shea, who works with veterans in Boston, to encounter radical evil is to make one forever different from the trusting so-called normal person who wraps the rightness of the social order around himself snugly like a cloak of safety. This moral core